A warm welcome to everybody to this international online conference or webinar and short film festival on interfaith understanding, how short films may be used in order to enhance interfaith understanding and also to be used in education for inclusive citizenship and coexistence. A warm thanks to all the international panelists from Asia, Middle East, Northern Africa that we will see soon, and also not least to the UN Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues, Fernand de Varenne, who is joining us, and to our partners, Minority Rights Group International and Ceasefire Center for Civilian Rights, and to our donor, NORAD, the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, for making this project possible. And we will start the whole session with viewing one of the films that has been produced within the Inclusive Citizenship Project with the Yazidi team, JAV, led by Saher Mirza and Omar Saed, and with the advice of Sahavi Sanjavi, Peace Journey, and we'll view the introduction to the film.
كيف يمكننا تعزيز إحساسنا بالمجتمع عبر اختلافات المعتقدات والتقاليد؟ كيف يمكن للأغلبية والأقليات تطوير شعور أقوى بالمجتمع؟ في عام 2019 نظمت مجموعة من نشطاء المجتمع المدني رحلة بين الأديان في كردستان العراق للأشخاص ذوي الهويات الدينية المختلفة. اليزيديين والمسلمين والمسيحيين والكاكايين والصابئة المندائيين، وقاموا بزيارة مواقع دينية مهمة لأقليتين دينيتين مختلفتين، المواقع المسيحية في القوش والموقع الديني الأيزيدي لالش.
طبعا أنا مسلم ومن الموصل، هاي أول مرة أجي على مدينة لالش المقدسة، شعور رائع وإحساس روحاني كلش قوي دا أشعر به حاليا، وفرحان إنه باستقبال أهل لالش لنا وللأيزيديين شلون مستقبلينا، وشلون يشرحون لنا بحب، يريدون يوصلون لنا أفكار، يريدون يوصلون لنا شهادة المقدسة مالهم. حسيت إنه قدسية المكان، حسيت بفرحة لأن أنا هنا، لأن عاد أشوف الأخوة الأيزيديين يمارسون طقوسهم، وطبعا أنا مع مقدسات ومقدسها المقدسات.
هدف هما شوي رحلة لأم رسالة كي بقي هنا عالمي إنه هكا تشلوبو هر عراق ولا نابي اشتنوع وهر وسام كر خلق زانبي أم همو أم سلامة خوازن وفرقايا كينينا وديانة همو جهة احترامي وتقديري.
This was from the film Peace Journey, made by a film team of Yazidi scholars and activists in Iraqi Kurdistan. And I'm wondering if we have Omar and Saher with us. Hopefully we will see them later. But again, thank you to Omar and Saher for making this wonderful film, the JAV team, made by Yazidi film team, with the support and advice from Sahavi Sanjavi, the film director, who will also be with us today, hopefully. So again, heartily welcome to everybody in different parts of the world, from the MENA region, from Asia, and also a particular welcome to Fernand de Varenne, the UN Special Rapporteur on Minority Issue. Thank you for joining us, Fernand, from Canada, very early in the morning for you, right? And we'll get back to you shortly with your keynote. Then also a special thank and heartily welcome to our co-moderator today, Sivin, who is with us from Geneva. Good morning, Sivin. Special rapporteur. And also a warm welcome to, in particular, Rasha Saba from Minority Rights Group International, one of our partners in this project. Good morning to you, Rasha. We'll get back to you shortly as well. And not least, Mark Latimer from Ceasefire Center for Civilian Rights, also coming to us from the UK. despite the pandemic. Thank you for being here and
pleased to be
joining
here.
us. And also, not least, from NORAD, Elisabeth Mustorp, who is a senior advisor at the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, NORAD, who's actually sponsoring not only this whole event, but most of the films that we will see today as a part of a joint project, which we have with Minority Rights Group International and Ceasefire Center for Civilian Rights. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
And happy to have you here. And
I'm very happy to be here and very excited to see all the films. I understand there has been a huge interest. So I'm looking very much forward to learn from all around the world what you have been working on. So happy to be here and happy to see all of you.
thank you. And then we have our director at the HL Center with us, Guri Hjeltnes. Thank you also for joining us due to the pandemic, also on Zoom.
We are so glad to organize this conference in partnership with the Norwegian Agency of International Law. And I just want to extend a warm welcome to our international partners, not least to the UN Special Rapporteur on Minorities, Fernand de Varenne, for joining us for Canada, and a special thanks to the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation for the support to the Inclusive Citizen project. This is an extremely important conference, and in the midst of the research at our center. So I'm so proud, Ingvild, for your courage and stamina to put this through under, I must say, quite complicated and difficult surroundings. So everyone have a good conference, and I do look forward to drop in and drop out and follow it. So
thank you so
welcome to
much,
us all.
Guri. Thank you for your confidence and encouragement. Thank you so much. And then it's my pleasure to introduce, before Fernand's keynote, we'll see one little film, not a little in the qualitative sense, but it's short. It's a 2-minute film produced by the Baza Bali, one of our partners in Indonesia within this NORAD project, as a part of a Wikiton, which they engaged more than 20,000 participants online. And they got, I don't remember, 30 or 40 films, short films made by students and others on their video camera, basically. And the winner of that competition, regionally in Indonesia, we're going to see now a beautiful little film called Unity.
Iraga embas ring gumi Indonesia. Gumi sane asri untuk penyuan pulau, sane ake maduwe keanekaragaman.
Saking mekuahnya ni, pulau saking Sabang rauh ke Merauke. Iraga sami pasti ke nenten tanruh malih saking Pulau Bali. Pulau sane eksotis, sane kasup sugih antuk seni lan budaya, lan mekuah pabinayan sane wenten. Sinalih tunggil pabinayan agama.
Pembinaan agama sane wenten, sepatutnya ne nenten nguatuang biota. Duaning kewiyaktian ne.
Pabinayan punika
Saling nagingin.
Pabinayan punika
Saling ngicenin.
Pabinayan punika jaktine pada nyinggi.
Raris pemupetnya nih, antuk cara punika pembinaan sane wenten boya je sekali waktu sane ngawangin. Nanging ngicenin iraga kayun nyantep, rasa sane nemu bahagia.
Titiang Hindu,
Titiang Protestan,
Titiang Katolik,
titiang Muslim,
titiang muda, titiang Konghucu.
Dan di tengah perbedaan kita ada persatuan.
So thank you, and we are fortunate also to have with us representations of Baza Bali with us, and we'll get back to that later. But now it's my pleasure to give the floor, or rather the screen, to Fernand de Varenne for his opening words to this online webinar and short film festival. Thank you again for joining us, Fernand.
Well, thank you, Ingvild, Father Stephen. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen from all around the world. Bonjour tout le monde. Selamat, marhaba, welcome. I'm delighted to be part of this launch, the launch of the Interfaith Short Film Festival called Living Together from Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa. So congratulations once again to the organizers, the Inclusive Citizenships Project at HL Senteret of the Norwegian Center for Holocaust and Minority Studies. And also, of course, its many partners in different regions of the world, including NORAD. Repression is never the only solution. And I say that at times because for many governments around the world, they may tend to use repressive laws to try to stop and punish those who are intolerant of others because of the color of their skin, the sound of their voices, or how they pray. And there's no doubt governments around the world, including international organizations such as the United Nations, are finding it very difficult to face the challenges of increasing violence around the world, growing intolerance and xenophobia, particularly against migrants and minorities, as well as rises in hate speech propagated and seemingly almost unstoppable through hate speech, leading to hate crimes and even atrocities in attempts to genocide. But repression and even tolerance does not capture the heart of those we should all be embracing as fellow human beings. There have to be other pathways towards more inclusive societies where we celebrate and share others with others of different faith and cultures instead of hiding behind walls of ignorance and prejudice. Your films and the web stories on interfaith understanding and inclusive coexistence are part of what we need to try to reach out to as many people as possible, to create a narrative and to help combat incitement to national, racial, or religious hatred, as we've attempted to do at the United Nations with the Rabat Plan of Action, which perhaps can also help to inspire inclusive citizenship project in the future. Because it is of the future that this Interfaith Short Film Festival speaks to, with so many young producers from Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa. We are all winners in this competition because I hope this will be able to be the beginning of another initiative, the beginning of a global effort, rather than simply the end of a competition on much needed interfaith understanding and a global positive practice towards societies that are more inclusive and not only tolerant of our religions, cultures, and languages. And it is in the spirit of looking at the future that I would invite you to consider perhaps using inclusive short films or stories, such as what you're producing today, what you'll be showing today, to help us also mark next year, in 2022, the 30th anniversary of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Persons Belonging to National or Ethnic, Religious, and Linguistic Minorities, and to show and to share how can we live together, work together, pray together in a world which, despite sometimes a very dark period many of us seem to be living in, we must always strive for peace and justice for everyone. And because, as I think we heard earlier in one of the films, even through our diversity, we are united as members of the human family. So good luck, everyone, and may the festival begin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fernand, for these encouraging words. And again, a warm thanks to everybody joining us from different parts of the world and for the wonderful films that you have produced within the framework of this project. And I would like, before we proceed to the first round of panel, which Steven is going to moderate, we will see a short clip from one of the films that has been produced recently, the India Diversity film. And I see that we have Pankaj Butalia with us, the film director in Delhi. So let's look at forget the Delhi diversity, and we are unfortunately not going to be able to see the full films because we have so many, but they will all be on our website, and you can see them in full screen there from there. And also making you aware that you can go to the right corner of your screens and press full screen, and then you will see the speaker or speaker view. Then you will see the film in full screen. So go to speaker view up in your right corner, please, and then you'll see the full film. Please, India diversity.
At the ceremonial level, if you look at the Central Avenue, the Chandni Chowk, going back 350 years, you can hear the azan from the mosque. You can hear the temple bells in the Hindu and Jain temples, hymns from the churches, and the worship in the Gurdwara. People in India have so many markers. One of these is religion. But when you reduce a private concern to a public one, you lose out on something. We all think we know what being a Muslim means, or a Christian, or a Jain, but we are not so sensitive to or think about the various layers that have gone into the lived religion and which has been borrowed from a common pool. The bridge that connects the individual, each of us, to the divine is the beauty and the grandeur of the Indian landscape. It is not just the large temples and the mosques, but also the small shrines by the roadside, which give people solace, where they can stop and pause for a little while. This is why a place like Delhi has been known by the name Hazrat Delhi, that is the holy city.
So this is just to tease you so that you would like to see the full film. It's a pity we cannot see the whole film, but it's a beautiful film. So thank you so much, Pankaj, for this contribution. I will get back to you shortly. Then we'll see the introduction also of a film from Tunisia made by another partner, Ayari Ghassan. I see that you're also with us, the director on behalf of Atlaki organization. Our most recent film, actually, it arrived only last week. So let's see the opening of The Pilgrims in Tunis, also produced within this project. So again, I'm so sorry that we cannot see the full film, but again, warm thanks to Ayari as well for making this beautiful film, and you're also free to see it online. We have it on our event site. Then it's my pleasure to give the floor, no, the screen, to Sivin for the first panel, which will be including our partners in the Middle East, Northern Africa, and then afterwards we'll hear from Asia. And yes, please, Sivin.
Thank you, Ingvild, for giving us the opportunity to have a little discussion together. I'd like to invite Saad, Zahavi, if you're here, or Azari and Rasha. They will be the panel from the Middle East, and if you could turn your cameras on, that would be very helpful. And the main question is basically this, and this is the same for both panels. How do you see these films, the contribution of interfaith films for interfaith understanding and peaceful coexistence? And also, how can they be used for educational purposes? And I'll start with Russia, because I think you are one of the very important organizations that co-partners with this. Maybe you can start the ball rolling, and then we can go to Ayari from a director's perspective. So Russia, over to you. What do you think?
Thank you so much. Very pleased to be here today, and I'm so excited to see the full versions of all these films. It's a really important question, I guess. And the simple answer is everyone like to watch films. So even those who are not interested in and hearing the others, and film is a very, very good tool that enables an entry point, I guess, for people who wouldn't otherwise care about interfaith dialogue or peace or social justice issues. After seeing a movie or a film, we have an immediate safe space that we among friends, among colleagues, that we shared experience and becomes a source of reflection and debate and conversation. I think initially this is what films can create. Obviously, the way that films can share, personal experiences, it's challenging. I think stereotypes and myths is the way that depends on nurturing this safe space and being a space for dialogue, I guess.
It's not more of creating space, using the films as a medium to create that kind of space for dialogue, right? Now, Ayari, you are one of the directors. From a director's perspective, you choose this medium, and perhaps you could give us some comments, and later we'll go to others.
Okay, so hey everyone, I'm so pleased to be with you today. I'm Ghassan Ayari, director of the movie Pilgrimage in Tunis. So I think that as Mrs. Asha was saying, and also Mr. Fernande Varenes, arts can play a big role in today's world, especially when we speak about human rights, minority rights, and especially also youth interest in that, because arts is something common and also based on perception, more efficient, because it's not only based on rational thoughts and intellect. So arts is something based on emotion. So it's like a common ground for everyone, and especially when we talk about youth and all that.
Right. It's not just about rational argument, right? Doctrines, but lived religion, like one of the films mentioned. So, and really dealing with stereotypes. Saad, Salom, you're around, but I know you have technical issues coming all the way from Iraq. And by the way, my name is Sivin Kit, Reverend Dr. Sivin Kit from the Lutheran World Federation. I'm the program executive for public theology and interreligious relations. We were so excited that we just jumped into the discussion. But Saad, are you able to speak to us?
I wish if you can hear my voice.
Yes, I can hear your voice. And
Excellent.
Can you just share with us what you feel? I know that you can't join us with your video because of technical issues, but could you share with us what do you think about these interfaith short films for education especially? Go ahead, Saad. Looks like Saad is still having challenges.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, Seven. Can I speak now?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you for having me in this important festival. And I think it's very important in a historical moment in the region, the Middle East, because the whole region witnessed increasing of hate speech. And political crisis, and this hate speech and political crisis effect of the diversity and coexistence. I think the movies is really important tool as a part of support.
Saad is having a bit of challenge again, but maybe we can switch to Mark Latimer. You're in person in Oslo, and while we try to figure out what's happening with Saad, and this also shows the challenge of doing this kind of hybrid event. And I thank you for all your understanding. Saad, we'll come back to you afterwards, but perhaps I just go to Ingvild first.
Thank you, Sivin. And we have Mark Latimer here with us from Ceasefire Center for Civil Human Rights, one of our other wonderful partners in this NORAD-sponsored project. So, Mark, do you have any reflections? Because you've also been using film in your previous and also current work. So, why do you use film when you want to improve the conditions for minorities, not least religious minorities?
Well, as Rasha just said, everyone loves watching film, and I think film enables you to do something that is very difficult to do just through words, which is also to convey the positive, to convey the experiences of a community, but in particular, positive experiences, which can be quite difficult in words. The Ceasefire Center works to develop civilian-led monitoring of violations in armed conflict, to empower civilians to recall what's happening and then to seek reparations. But as soon as you get to a violation, it's almost too late. In fact, it's literally too late. What you need to do is to prevent violations from happening in the first place. That's why interfaith dialogue is so important. That's why mutual understanding is so important. And I think film enables you to see those processes work in a way that words cannot. I mean, I often think at the United Nations, for example, when you're looking at people speaking, you're hearing people speaking, you're very conscious that when they get to the positive, it can sound a little bit banal. People are just saying, we support peace and justice, we support all the good things in life, we support apple pie and so on and so forth. But to actually convey what it means to make peace, the hard choices, the difficult accommodations, the real understanding, the lived tolerance, I think is very difficult. And that's where I think film can have an added value as an expressive medium, as we've already seen this morning. And I think it's really exciting seeing these films.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, and again, a warm thanks to all our wonderful film producers in various parts of the world, and to NORAD for making this possible. Before we proceed, and thank you, Sivin, for including our panelists from Middle East, Northern Africa. Before we go to the ones from Asia, we will see now first opening of a film that has been produced by Saad Saloom, who is, by the way, director of the Masarat for Education and Culture, and also a co-founder of the Interfaith Council in Iraq, and a partner of this project since a long time back. So wonderful to hear you, at least, Saad. And this film, the beginning that we will see, is addressing the issue of hate speech, which is also, as Mark says, we need to face the challenges, and then some of our films may be a response to that, to overcoming them, hopefully. But let's look at this very important short documentary produced within this project on the issue of hate speech from Iraq.
رسالتي للشارع العراقي بصورة عامة من جنوبه إلى شماله لكل الأطياف والديانات بأنه خلي الكل إنسانية وحبنا للآخرين، إنه نحن نعيش بأرض واحد، نكون إخوان. رسالتي الدينية أيضا خلي دينك إلك، عبادتك لله لا لويا الآخرين، وبعدين عاشر ويا صاحبك من غير دين أو من غير مذهب كأخ، لا تطلع عليه من ديننا أو من مذهب الآخرية.
العراق بالفترة الأخيرة أخذ على عاتقه مهمة الحفاظ على هذا التنوع، ودعني أقول كانت هناك محاولات جيدة، لكن ما يحافظ على هذا التنوع هو بالدرجة الأساس هو التقليل من خطاب التحريض والكراهية على المكونات، الإيمان بهم كجزء من المجتمع وجزء مهم وحيوي ويثري المجتمع، وأن تعمل الحكومة أيضا بجهازها الأمني على توفير الحماية للأقليات تحديدا التي تشكل الجزء المهم من مجتمعاتنا تحديدا في المناطق الجنوبية أو غيرها.
البلد
So thank you. This was, unfortunately, again, we cannot see the whole film, but thank you to Saad Salom and Maserat for producing this film on the issue of hate speech and how to overcome it. And with that, back to you, Sivan, again, and you can include your panelists from Asia, including Pankaj, who made the wonderful film on the Delhi diversity, and also Sriprafa. And I would like to say that Sriprafa, of course, has then not only with her position at Maidal University at the Institute of Peace and Human Rights Studies, but also as the convener of the Asia Network on Human Rights Education, has also introduced a contest similar to the one that we've had in Iraq on making short films, encouraging students to make short films, as was done in Indonesia. And we'll get back to that later and introduce the winners also on that contest. So we had 3 national contests, one in Indonesia, one in Iraq, and then one regional one in ASEAN. So thank you, Sriprafa, for convening that. And yes, then back to you, Sivan.
Thank you. I'd like to invite my panelists to be present. Pankaj, he's the director, a film director from India, and of course, Sriprafa as well. Just like to invite you to come forward, and Saruni, who's from Indonesia, also coming in, and we have this little discussion. I think we're warming up now to the whole film festival. Things are moving on very fast, but it's the same 2 key questions. One is, what is the added value of using these interfaith short films? And you could add on to your perspectives on that. Sriprafa, let me start with you first.
Thank you, Sivan. In fact, the production of learning materials for us and for the network and for the Institute of Human Rights and Peace Studies is not new, but we initiated the production of the textbook since 2013. And then in 2017, we began to produce the online courses based on the textbook that we produce. By the way, the textbook that I'm talking about is the textbook on teaching human rights and peace. We believe that the learning should be a dynamic combination of imparting knowledge through different tools, especially visualized materials that students and youth of the 21st century are now familiar with. We also recognize that the critical importance of technology, in increasingly digitalized society, which was quite explicit, I think, in SDT. And of course, the COVID-19 alert us to the importance of digital technology in education. We also believe that visualized material will not only attracting curiosity, but also relevant to teaching context that students and youth are in currently, the digital era. So, we feel strongly that an innovative pedagogy that are dynamic through digital and visualized learning will contribute to, leverage, the different ways of supplementing the learning among students. And I think that, keeping pace with the new communication technology designed for the modern context is extremely important.
Thank you so much. And I guess nowadays it is not just about books, but these living books through visuals, through audio, and getting through the senses, like the feeling part of it, the existential moments. And I like to just turn my attention to Pankaj. You're the director here, coming from a very multicultural, multi-religious context of India, and which is very much what Asia is all about as well. like what was mentioned from the Middle East. Could you give us some perspective from a film director's point of view? What runs in your mind as you look at these interfaith films?
Yeah, the thing is that we've, as one of the anchor in my film says, we have so many layers in us that sometimes it is almost impossible to characterize ourselves as one or the other. For instance, I'll just give you a very small example that I am part of a tradition of Hindus in which the oldest male member becomes a Sikh, which is a long tradition of contributing to one particular sect from another, And if you come to some Christian churches in the Northeast, you find the huge transition from, the Presbyterian church to the Salvation Army, to the Catholic Church and so on. So there is a kind of, multiplicity in our lived lives. And for me, I think it's very important to see this also reflected in the lives of other people, because and I think the audiovisual material films allows us to break it down much more with much more subtlety than, for instance, the written word. I'm not really making that characterization, but I think it's slightly easier to be able to, because we engage with it slightly more. We can engage with the visual material much more spontaneously than reading. Reading requires the habit of actually investing in words, learning to extract meaning from words, whereas images speak to us slightly more directly. So I think, this, which is helping us decipher what the other is, and that's the biggest danger in our lives, that the other is always being stereotyped. And that is a convenience, and that is the backbone of hate speech, to stereotype and put down. So, this kind of material allows us to break it down and to be able to move from one space to the other with slightly more ease. And I think it's something we need to do much, much more and much more intensively, and I think much more critically, as Mark was saying, that not just films about everything being okay, but we need to get to the disturbance points also and bring them out much more rigorously.
Thank you. I really appreciate your point, because I think sometimes if it's left to our own imagination, we bring our own baggages and stereotype into the reading, but the film actually challenges us because it humanizes in many ways the people whom we have that stereotype on. So thank you, Pankaj, for that. Suruni, we'd love to hear from you. And obviously, I think we can see that you are the younger face amongst us, and the youth, of course, very much engage more with film and social media rather than text, even though we know that's important. Could you share with us your views of how you see these interfaith films? And coming from Indonesia, I'm sure you have plenty to share with us. Thank you. Over to you, Suruni.
So first of all, thank you for the opportunity. I feel greatly honored being perhaps the youngest here. I feel like I have a lot to learn from everyone. But from my perspective, as part of the younger generation and also as part of a minority religious community, I think that these interfaith films, I think they give, particularly in the context of Indonesia, where in recent years, the freedom of expression, particularly on the issue of religion and faith, it has been repressed to an extent from the government and also from other communities as well. So I think the media of film gives a platform to express not just the differences in faith and religion, but also I think films also portray like visual metaphors, I think, that can have universal values that can relate to each and every person, but from their own perspectives, like from each and every individual, it can be interpreted differently. And I think the point of these films is not to only trigger the critical side of the viewers as those who watch the films, like, hey, I think from watching these films, I think there's something that I can relate to in my own community. But also I think a lot of the education aspect of this film also comes in fostering a safe space for the viewers to also speak out on what they think, what their reinterpretations of the films, of the visual metaphors presented within these films. And I think also for educational purposes, particularly for the younger generation, I think it's important to also provide that there are limitations towards film, like there are limitations in duration and the plot. And I think exploring these limitations can be fostered in a safe space. I think that's one of the critical aspects to follow up on. And also the point about how, regardless of faith, the freedom of expression from the girls' or the women's perspective, I think in many faith and religion is deemed quite subservient to the men, I think. And so these safe spaces post watching these films become very, very important.
This is the irony of it. On one hand, it's a safe space. On the other hand, there are also limitations. And we will spend more time talking about some of the challenges afterwards. But I really appreciate your input on this, just to get us starting us to think about it. And we caught a glimpse of the films, and so want to appreciate that. So we want to deal with stereotypes, but at the same time, we don't want to perpetuate stereotypes in the film. But that's for later, for our discussion. Is there anything you would like to add, Sri Prafa, after you hear the two of my other panelists, from your perspective?
Just one point, Sivan, that I would like to mention, that learning about the issues, well, learning itself is about instilling both cognition and emotion. And I really, feel that watching film or video actually is one of the good ways, not only to instill or to increase cognition, but also to, attract emotion, because especially in the field of human rights and peace education, because it's not, it's about developing human flourishing and education for humanity. Pictures, I believe, says more than words. So the combination of words and pictures would be important one.
Thank you. I'm going to just draw this brief panel to a close now, and I'm going to pass the time back to Ingvill. But of course, we can continue this conversation later. I want to appreciate your contributions so far. And indeed, it's especially in the realm of human rights and issues of religion, sometimes there's a danger of becoming overly rational and not dealing with the emotional aspects. And we want to have a more holistic approach to this. And we want to be critical, but at the same time constructive. And the creative ways of doing this really engages the audience more. And I think right now, in the times of pandemic, where we are very much stuck at home again, and these ways, especially in social media, often are abused for misinformation, and we need to provide kind of a counter narrative or a more constructive narrative for the way forward. So Ingvill, I'd like to pass the time back to you so that you can take us for the next phase. Thank you. And thank you to all my panelists.
Thank you, Sivan, for this other panel from Asia. And before we move to the maybe even more interesting panel where everybody's included, as well as our panelists here, on the challenges that we've also already heard a little bit about and how to overcome those challenges when using films, producing films for interfaith purposes, but also in education. We will see two more films produced by our partners in Asia, and the first one is actually the winner of the contest that I just mentioned earlier, that Sri Prafa organized as a part of the ASEAN Network on Human Rights Education, and it's made by students, and it's called 6 Places of Worship, and it's from Indonesia, and there are some very harsh parts of the introduction, and we know, of course, that there are several groups, religious groups in Indonesia, including also the Ahmadiyya, but this film addresses maybe the 5 largest groups. So let's see the introduction to this film.
Ini merupakan salah satu contoh proyek ya, percontohan bahwa toleransi itu bisa dibangun.
Perumahan itu menginginkan adanya pasar modern di sini. Tetapi oleh karena keinginan dari warga, khususnya dari warga Muslim yang menginginkan adanya sebuah masjid begitu, itu dimengerti oleh pihak perumahan, pihak pengembang, akhirnya memikirkan akan membangun rumah ibadah. Tetapi tidak hanya satu, tapi langsung 6 agama yang diakui di Indonesia. Jadi akhirnya 6 rumah ibadah ini berdiri hari ini.
Alhamdulillah ya, selama saya di sini tidak ada yang namanya permasalahan antar umat agama. Justru pernah suatu hari itu ketika umat Muslim merayakan Idul Fitri, nah sedangkan itu pas waktu hari Minggu bersamaan dengan ibadah dari umat Kristiani ya kan. Nah di situ para pemuka agama saling berdiskusi. Akhirnya ada keputusan bahwasanya umat Kristiani mengalah.
So thank you again. Again, we cannot see the whole film, but we encourage people to see it online, which is available on our website. And it's easy to find all these films. Just to remind you, if you go to the www, and you might maybe show the project website, inclusivecitizenship.no, which composes all these films on the event sites. You can go to the event site, but you also can search for the films under also web stories. You'll find web stories that we get back to later. But go to that site and you'll see all the films. Now, I would like us to also see part of the other film from Asia, produced by our partners there, an interfaith organization combined with the Lutheran World Federation's local branch in Indonesia. Actually, that was how we got in touch with Sivan to begin with, who's actually from Malaysia but based in Geneva. And so this is really international. And from that partner, which is also including Jakarta Rub in Indonesia, we got a wonderful little film called A Place Among the Stars, and it also encompasses some very harsh scenes, but I can assure you the ending is very encouraging. We will not see that, but let's see a short part of that film. Place Among the Stars.
Tapi kemanapun tujuannya, bukankah pada akhirnya kamu tetap harus memilih jalan yang kamu yakini?
Hai Susan, tinggalkan desa ini sekarang juga. Cepat!
So thank you so much. I hope this is just a teaser for you to go and see these films. And thank you again to Jakarta Rub and also to the partners in Indonesia for A Place Among the Stars, a beautiful and very, very strong film as well. And before we go to the panel on the challenges and how to overcome them, we will see a film that has produced, just to turn into the Middle East, Northern Africa region again, a little bit from Asia. We'll see one of the films that has been produced by Minority Rights Group International as a part of this project. And Russia, Saba is with us, of course, in the panel as a representative of MRG. And it's been produced actually with the same film director that we have been using for a number of our films from the Kurdish region of Iraq, the famous film director Zahavi Sanjavi, who is on and off with us because his mother is sick. But let's see the opening of that film, which addresses the law on religious freedom from 2015 in KRE and also the religious diversity in that specific region of Iraq.
الإنسان ولد ليكون حراً، فجميع المؤسسات الحقوقية والهيئات التي تدافع عن حقوق الإنسان تعمل على أن يكون الإنسان حراً له رأيه وأن يكون هنالك نوع من العدالة بين جميع البشر.
لدينا الآن 8 أديان ممثلة في إقليم كردستان، وهم المسلمين، المسيحيين، اليزيديين، اليهود الكرد، الصابئة المندائيين، الكاكائيين، الزردشتيين والبهائيين.
في الإقليم عندنا قانون يسمى قانون حماية المكونات رقم 5 لسنة 2015.
Thank you very much, and thank you to MRG and also their partner Adian Foundation in Lebanon, who produced the film with grants from this project, eventually from NORAD. Thanks again. And before we turn to your international panelists, Sivan, I would like to welcome a new panelist here in the Norwegian little corner of the world. One of my dear colleagues here at the HL Center, Claude Ellens, professor, and also specializing not least in education for inclusive citizenship, one might summarize it, and including teachers training, which is crucial, of course, in order to avoid some of the challenges that we see. So please, Claudia, can we hear from you just a few words from your pedagogical perspective on the options and also the challenges and how to approach this actually from a more theoretical perspective, maybe?
Yeah, thank you for having me here. And congratulations to this great project. I think working with film, and the previous panel showed it, it has a tremendous strength in education because it appeals, as it was said before, to the cognitive and to the emotional dimension of learning. So in a learning theoretical perspective, it is it provides an opportunity for a kind of holistic learning about also difficult subjects, which maybe are difficult or challenging to approach only cognitively. From a perspective of citizenship education, the strengths of film also can have a backside, because as we know, film or visual means can also be used for manipulation, for propaganda. So what a concept which we are working with is narrative competence. So what we want to develop in learners working with film or visual narratives is the competence to both construct and develop your own narratives, and I think this is we have a rich proof here that, especially from a minority side, this is a very important competence to raise your voice, to produce your own narratives, to show and make your own perspective heard. The other side of that narrative competence is what we call deconstructive competence, and that means to meet films and other narratives as narratives, because the authenticity of film also can be kind of a trap, that something which is produced in a very convincing way sells in narratives or perspectives, or as it was mentioned, stereotyping perspectives which are problematic. So what we also work with students and with teacher students is to have this interplay of proximity and distance. So you see a film and you engage in it, you create empathy, work with perspective taking, and then again you take a step back and analyze what is the perspective, how is this narrative constructed, which elements are included, and which things might be chosen away or eluded. This is basically, or in a very short version, what I think is an interesting educational approach to work with films, making use of the strength and at the same time building in a kind of security mechanisms to ensure the reflexivity when working with films.
Thank you, Claudia. And this is also what has been addressed by Sivan and several panelists already. Like we have seen in some films that we meet like one Buddhist or one Muslim or one Christian, whatever. And then one might think, oh, that's how all Buddhists are like. That's how all Christians are like. This is how all Muslims are like. And as we all know, there is a rich diversity within each of these groups, as we are actually all individuals. And so this recognition of this diversity within each tradition or group is of course very fundamental, and for the teacher to be aware of before showing the film and before talking to the students. And this is one of the principles that we have presented on this webpage that you can see, along with the films and film material, that the teachers should reflect upon these perspectives from before. And also, as you say, to look at how a film is made, how it's a selection of reality, but still recognizing the power of films to reach what we say in this project. Actually, it became the heading of the midterm evaluation of the NORAD project, to learn with the heart and mind, which you touch upon, that it reaches people deeply, but that's also a challenge to. And before we turn to our international panelist, Mark Latimer again from Ceasefire Center for Civilian Rights, our other partner. Could you also maybe comment on some of the challenges and possible approaches to them that has been raised, or other points that you would like to bring in?
I thought what we just heard, I thought it was really interesting what you said, and this difficult relationship between the problematic in film, between the stereotype or between narratives which create problems for particular communities, and the possibility of a positive film. And I think for me, I was very struck by what Saruna had to say about the notion of film as a safe space. And I think in many ways, perhaps that could be a test. Because what you have to put against what the sort of films that we're watching today is this overall weight of stereotype that's out there in the mainstream media. Yes. So if you think about Hollywood and about how Black Americans, people of African descent have been portrayed for decades and decades and decades, you think about this overwhelming weight of stereotype, about how in Hollywood now, or for the last 20 years, we've seen Arabs or Muslims portrayed in very particular ways. Once again, this huge weight of the stereotype that's almost like a sort of cage that encloses a people's experience and that really doesn't allow any discussion. It doesn't allow anyone to get in. But against that, if a film can offer up a space for discussion, that's hugely important. And it's a space in which you don't have to agree with everything. It doesn't have to reflect, it cannot reflect everyone's experience. You might not even particularly like the vision of the filmmaker, but at least if it offers up enough space that there can be a discussion, that there can be a critical reflection and engagement, then that is a hugely positive thing. And I think that's the sort of thing that we are trying to promote with the films that we've been seeing today.
Yes, thank you. I agree, Mark. Yes, Clara?
Yeah, this is very interesting because one aspect of this taking a distance is probably also a kind of intertextual approach. And as you say, and it was mentioned, this notion of counter-narrative, that you see that there is a narrative and it is produced in relation to something, and it is produced in opposition to something or in accordance to something, and just the awareness of this positionality. So where is this film in a whole landscape of representations is something which has a very important educational effect, I think.
Yes, thank you. Thank you also for bringing in that. And then it's back from our little Oslo corner to the world via Geneva. Sivan.
I talk about positionality. I think my panelists are all positioned in quite different places, and not only geographically, but also in their location as an educationist, as a student, or perhaps as a youth worker, a person engaged in interfaith dialogue and so on, directors, and of course in the NGO. So I have right now with me Pankaj, Ayari, Russia, and also I think Suri Prafa, you're here. And maybe we can bring in Saruni as well. I think her contribution was very, very helpful. And let's just have a little conversation about what we have heard. We've heard about narratives. We have thought about how narratives are being shaped or by reality, or is the narrative shaping reality? I think there's this tension there. We've also talked about reflexivity, the need to have an open, not just a safe space, but an open space for critical reflection and conversation. We don't have to agree with what is portrayed, and maybe that itself opens up a discussion. And at the same time, there was this point about intertextuality. That's where we started the social location and so on. But it's quite complex. These are challenges for both the learner and the director, you could say that, as well as those who are producing these films, and for educationists. So let's go a little bit to the challenges here, and maybe we can start with the director, Pankaj. You have to make choices when you make a film. And what are those challenges that you wrestle with in order to portray reality? So there's not just propaganda. Of course, there is a counter-narrative aspect to it, but there's also a self-critical dimension in your direction. Could you share with us your views?
Yeah, okay. So it's important first, if one is working in this particular sphere, to try to see what is the misconception that you are dealing with, and the misconception in the mind of the individual of the kind that you're dealing with. This is a very important thing. So if, for instance, I'm trying to make a film, this is not, I can just give you an example from one of my earlier films, a film about the whole issue of widowhood in India, how widowhood has been treated within Hinduism, not so much within Islam, but within Hinduism, and how widow remarriage was something that was disapproved of traditionally. Okay, so a widow was supposed to give up all pleasure once she was widowed, and to have to give up all, even in terms of the diet she was allowed, she had to go to a very abstemious diet so that she didn't have the notion of enjoying life once her husband was dead. Now, when I was making the film, I had to make it from a point of view of the kind of person who thinks it is legitimate to let this woman go. Okay. Whereas if I stand out and make a film from my perspective, I would be critical of that perspective so clearly that it would draw a barrier between me and the person watching it if they did not accept my point of view. So in a sense, I would be making what is called a film preaching to the converted. Okay. Now the thing is that when you're dealing with stereotypes, you have to go to the root of the stereotype and try to see what is in the mind of the person who believes in this, and then try to address that. It's a very big challenge because you need to step out of yourself, you need to step out of your comfort zone and try to put something which is not very popular, is not very easily accepted, because even people who are progressive, like the truth to be packaged in the form that they are familiar with. That's the irony, that everyone likes the truth or a narrative to be packaged in ways which are palatable to us. And the whole point is to make a little bit of dent in that narrative, in the palativeness of the narrative, so that the person who's viewing can also develop a slightly open mind towards what you are trying to say. I mean, I'll stop here, let the others join in.
Yes,
this is the challenge.
Yes, I like to also get Ayari into this panel as well, because that's another director's perspective from the Middle Eastern region. But I'd like to just turn to Russia a little bit now. I think earlier we didn't have more chance to hear from you. Now, coming from an NGO perspective, or someone who's an advocate for minority rights and the concern, what are some challenges that you see from your perspective?
Yeah, thank you, Sven, and really very interesting, reflections and from all panelists today. I think just to reflect on one of our experiences, I guess, it is especially like I agree with like how you how we should be sensitive in terms of, generalizing some like specific narratives, but also in the context where you have highly persecuted a minority, for example, or group. How do you communicate that into the film? How do you communicate their stories without actually, and how you promote like accountability without, pointing a finger towards like specific group, but also demonize the other that you are, like when you tell this story. I think it is challenging to do so. It is challenging to communicate, like these really difficult stories, and I'm not, and at the same time trying to tell, the realities of those persecuted, and I think it is hard, one of these hard experiences, I guess, or difficult experiences when you communicate. And I would like to also hear from other, like, I'm not a director or not filmmaker per se, so would like to hear from others on that. Thanks.
And maybe we can do that because this is the difficulty, right? On one hand, we want to lift up the voices and the experiences of those who are, if I may use the word, oppressed or struggling, right? At the same time, we don't want to make the perpetrator or at least demonize the other, right? So Ayari, as a director, I'll turn to you first before I go back to Saruni. You're here. If you could unmute yourself. I think Rasha was really turning to your direction. I would love to hear from you the kind of self-critical choices that you make when that is important from a filmmaker's perspective. Ayari, over to you.
Thank you so much. So it all depends actually on the thematic or the subject that I'm going to show in the movie. For example, Pilgrimage in Tunis was a documentary of 10 minutes shedding the light on 3 communities in Tunisia. We have the Sunni Muslim, who are the majority, then the Anglican community, one of the most important minority in Tunisia, and also the Jew community, the most traditional, let's say, religious minority in Tunisia in terms of presence. So, and also in numbers. So, for example, for this documentary, what I tried to do is to say simply that we have religious minorities in Tunisia. For those who know the situation in Tunisia, we have like 10 million people, 11 million like citizens, but 10 million who are in the Muslim community, and the majority doesn't even know that there is like Tunisians who belong to other religious communities. So even the fact that you are showing places of worship in the capital of Tunis, that they are historically there, with the presence of Tunisians worshipping God, but in another manner than the majority, is the thematic that I wanted to put in this documentary. But for other movies, what I want really to say is that it depends on the thematic and the subject that I'm going to deal with. That's what I can say.
Thank you. I mean, there's a lot of choices that are made, both in the production, in the direction, in the dissemination, in the use of the movies. And this actually reflects a lot on our values in many ways. And I'd like to just turn to Saruni first before we go back to Sri Prafa, because some are more documentary-like. These are the films that we have seen. Some are more short, more just presenting a slice of life. And others are fiction, in a sense, using fiction, like A Place Among the Stars. It's based on true life stories, but it's using fiction as well. So we have this range of genres when it comes to the film that tries to do all that our expert panelists were talking about: narrative, reflexivity. There's so much going on. So now you, as someone who's engaged in interfaith dialogue and trying to create a safe space, now, how do you, what are the challenges you see as you face these complexities of reality, but also complexities of the genre, the films that are used? Do you have some reflections on this, especially amongst the younger crowd?
Yeah, I think a lot of the films, they have sometimes, even if they films try to portray diversity, I think. Diversity sometimes, as like young people trying to watch them, young people usually think that okay, perhaps that is the definition of diversity. When in reality, there's all sorts of different definitions of diversity, and having, I think, all these different genres and even these different snippets of films, I think it can actually be useful in providing different perspectives. I think that can be useful as a starting point for discussions after the discussions after the films. I think so. I think it's actually good having a lot of these different perspectives, though. It's still the important task is to also have that space to talk about it. So yeah.
Back to space to talk about it, and now moving back to the educationist perspective here from Sri Prafa, and as you hear the challenges in making the films, and now the challenges when it comes to using these films, do you have any thoughts, especially in the ASEAN perspective too?
Sirin, actually my answer is not only about using the film, but it's even about talking about the issues. As educator and human rights advocate myself, for this competition, we had not received as many submissions as we wish. And we realized that the theme that we fixed, which is minority relationship and inclusive citizenship, we realize that this is not easy because a student may not understand our vocabularies as educator teaching at the university. And Saruni also just talked about different interpretations, which is quite true in my opinion, because the films that we got show different interpretations of what we are talking about. So I think simplifying the language is necessary, and this has to be accompanied by the continuous discussions and dialogue within education system. But the second thing is actually more serious, because the issue of religion and ethnicity seem to be both public and political issues, as we know, in this region. And in the eyes of the governments, issues of race and religions are perceived as the most, we use the term, visceral and dangerous for light. So, not to actively discuss, even in the classroom. And this is a very, as I said, this is a sensitive matter that most people avoid to openly discuss, including the classroom, as I mentioned. We are currently trying to ensure that we include this in our syllabus. In fact, for your information, Sibu, we are organizing a training course for university lecturers in Malaysia. We usually include rights of minorities in our syllabus, not much problem. But for the first time, the issues of religions and human rights are included in our training program. So I feel that to overcome the challenges, it's not about avoiding to talk, but more about constructing and mainstreaming the discourse through various tools. Maybe the third one is, of course, the digital divide that we all know. So I'm not going to talk about that much. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri Prafa. I think you really raised an important issue. Sometimes we assume that these films can be shown or discussed in an environment that is quite open and free. But in actual fact, sometimes even a very innocent-looking film in some situations can be deemed sensitive and can be difficult. And that's also the challenges outside of the film, the context in which it happens. So, Rasha, apparently that you have some online training that you do in MRG. Could you share a little bit with us about that? And this is where the digital divide might come in, as was mentioned. But do share with us some of your experiences from that.
Yeah, definitely. So at MRG, we have this online training. It is basically on minority rights and having advocacy tools and how we can advocate for minority rights on different levels, the national, the international, and the regional when possible, obviously. I think just to reflect on the question of the digital divide. I guess like most of our participants are from like a specific age group. Obviously, we don't have this criteria. We don't have we accept everyone, but also the the availability of and the internet. When like you have a very remote area, you have areas in like a fragile state or like conflict zone that they don't have access necessarily all the time for power and internet. So it is difficult sometimes to reach that segment, but I guess like making it more like phone friendly. I guess everyone use their phones. Phones can prove to be very like a very important tool in reaching out people. Like also it's been used like in humanitarian settings, so we kind of learning and from each other. So yeah, this is briefly on the online course. We're going to have a new round very soon next year. So I invite everyone to like who can be interested in participating and also disseminate the call, obviously.
Thank you so much, Rasha. And one thing I've noticed that, especially when it comes to the spread of disinformation and or the spread of stereotypes or problematic narratives, often these actors use the phone very effectively, or a short YouTube video. And in many ways, we are catching up. But I think through this interfaith short films, we are learning how to produce them, but also we are also reflecting a bit how to disseminate. At the same time, as Sri Prafa mentioned, there are also contexts that are difficult, and we must not forget about the digital divide. So this has been a very rich discussion, and I want to appreciate all the panelists from a director's perspective, from a user's perspective, from an educational's perspective, as well as for those who are engaged in human rights work, or even for people like me who is trying to get the faith communities together so that we can use these films for the benefit of the common good, or promoting social cohesion and inclusive societies. I think we want a safe space, but also an open space for discussion and reflection. So I'm going to pass the time back to Ingvild right now, as she will share with us a bit more about online resources that can be adapted, I believe, for the phone or for other ways of using it. So thank you once again, my panelists, for this important topic. Thank you. Over to you, Ingvild.
Thank you so much, Sivin, and thank you for sharing these thoughts and reflections. I will get back to, at the end, of course, hearing from Fernand. He wants to have the word at the very end. He will. And we'll continue a little bit now with what Rasha raised on the issue of online training, and what also have been addressed by others on the need for supplementary resources. We cannot, or if we just see a film without previous thoughts and reflections, other links to other resources for assessing them from a critical perspective and going into depth with more other complementary resources, then that might, in the worst case, contribute to what we want to avoid, namely stereotypes, and what we want to combat. So as a part of that work, we have included these wonderful new films that have been produced by partners into what we call web stories as part of this inclusive citizenship project. If you want to see them, you can just go online to inclusivecitizenship.no and then go to web stories. And then we have made this map, and this is of course also with support from Norwegian Minister of Foreign Affairs, the general project, but here we have included what we call web stories on interfaith issues. Meet people, go to places based on our funding from NORAD and our cooperation with Ceasefire Center and Minority Rights Group International. And if we, for instance, go to Iraq and see then the Peace Journey web story, you will recognize the film that you saw in the very beginning of this webinar, which is about the interfaith excursions organized by the JAV team, Sahir and Umar, who are with us, hopefully still, from Iraqi Kurdistan, who made this wonderful film, Peace Journey, with the assistance also of of Zahavi Sanjavi, the film director. And if we go here, we can see we have fact boxes. You can click on this fact box, like religious diversity in Iraq, for instance, and then you get some facts about what religious groups exist there, a little bit about the history, but also if you click on terror against religious minorities, recognizing the challenges in this context. Now, if you continue further down, scrolling down, you can see a first clip from the film, and if we scroll a little bit down, you can hear even the voice and voiceover.
في عام 2019 نظمت مجموعة من نشطاء المجتمع المدني.
And you can go further down, and further down you will see more from the film with supplementary resources and fact
وقاموا
boxes.
بزيارة مواقع دينية مهمة لأقليتين دينيتين مختلفتين.
And you can go further down. We don't have the time to see all of it. It goes to the bottom of the page, and including the fact boxes and different aspects, we were then added at the very end of the story. You will see the full possibility of seeing the full film, but also to share your thoughts with the group, so it's interactive. And then at the end you will find supplementary resources when you can go more into depth, etc. And then for educators to go to the education page and etc. So if we go back to the map of web stories, to the starting point, the landing page, then we can also go to other regions. Like, for instance, we can go to India and to see the film that has been recently added. Oh, no, it's not added, the film on diversity. But we can look at this one, for instance, showing also the challenges, not only the nice interfaith experiences, but the harsh situation for Muslims in Assam currently due to the new registration of citizenship. And the state of India implemented stricter standards regarding their documentation. So we cut it short, just for you to see that we also have learning stories addressing the challenges to interfaith understanding and coexistence. And at the bottom of this page as well, you can see supplementary resources, sharing your thoughts, and also supplementary resources, as well as at the very bottom, learning tools and educational material. So if we go out of this site, I would like to then introduce another way of if you go to the events, the front page of Inclusive Citizenship, the front page, you will then find the resources at the top of the menu. You go to resources, you click there, and then you can search on topic. Like you can choose the topic, for instance, diversity, and then you click on, for instance, video documentaries, and then you will see most of the films that we have seen here will be added here as well. With the Pilgrims in Tunisia and other films that we have here. If you click, for instance, on tolerance in the family, you will see another film also from Indonesia. But you can also find, if you go to the top of the menu, you can go to the point for educators. And then at the bottom of that page, in addition to the principles that we have learned about, we have, a little bit further up, we have resources. Under the heading resources at the bottom, a little bit further down, you can click and go to online resources, some guidelines for teaching. If you click on there, you will be able to see the principles that we have been discussing. For instance, from the project that Dembra project that Claudia is heading on inclusive citizenship, that we have to recognize the diversity within each group and the similarities across the different groups, and that no person represents a religion as such, etc. Very important principles for teachers. So supplementing then the films with learning materials for teachers and trainers in order to avoid these stereotypes. And on that note, I am so happy to have with me Maria from the Stephanus Alliance International, who is producing, or has actually produced, a wonderful other landing platform on FORB, or Freedom of Religion or Belief. So thank you so much, Maria, for joining us.
Thank you for inviting
we'll
us.
have a look here. We have the Freedom of Religion or Belief learning platform. When we go to resources there, we can see that also you include film resources. You can look at the resource page, which includes film resources and also other resources. So my first question to you would be then, why are you using films as a part of this wonderful learning platform?
Well, I think, thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to hear all of your experiences and thoughts. And we also use films because we think it is a great way of explaining to people what freedom of religion or belief and human rights are, because we find that it's often people do not understand the breadth and full of the concept. There are a lot of misunderstandings out there. So one way of trying to combat that is to use films.
Yes. And then, of course, you include, as we also do for the Interfaith and Inclusive Citizenship platform, also for the FOR platform, you include other resources and like training courses and other material as well. Could you say a little bit about why you do that and also what it includes very briefly?
Yeah, if you go to the top of the page, there is courses to the far right on the page. So we have online courses, which are both facilitated and non-facilitated. And we use this as a training resource for people that are actually working in the field to kind of, although films are a great way of learning, we find that it's not enough in a sense. There has to be something more that adds to what films can give us. So this is why we have a lot of resources that kind of grasps to a better extent the freedom of religion or belief concept, which is kind of, we use a lot of resources such as courses, which are interactive and which makes people come together and be able to actually discuss what they learn and what they hear as this is kind of a comprehensive concept. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Maria, and for joining us and introducing that. And also to say that if we go now back to our panelists, I would like to then ask Rasha, yes, thank you, Rasha from Minority Rights Group International, to say something about how they also in MRG, as a part of this project, as well as in general, develops also courses on freedom of religion or belief and have trainings for people in different parts of the world and workshops, in particular to provide understanding for the basis of interfaith understanding, which I would say is definitely a human rights-based understanding of equal human dignity and including freedom of religion or belief for everybody and non-discrimination. So Rasha, could you say a little bit about the work that MRG does in this field for training, including films? I know that MRG also uses film. We've just seen one of the films that you've produced from this project, but you've produced a number of films from before. And so a little bit about the need for supplementary resources for trainings in addition to the films.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Engveld. Well, yes, definitely. MRG have been developing online trainings and also been involving in trainings in general for a long time now. This is part of our belief in capacity building and promoting, the principle of, freedom of religion and belief, but also, minority rights from a human rights perspective. Obviously, that was based on, and I think like Mark can also reflect on that since he was involved in creating that kind of framework. That was part of basically the, recognizing a gap on the ground where, human rights activists and minority rights activists found themselves like some skills and knowledge and maybe capacity in doing like specific things, and we recognize that, and the online training and the resources that we've been developed is a response to that. We also complement online resources to be transformed and transferred into roundtables and workshops and face-to-face trainings that brings people also from different parts of the region to share and exchange their experiences and their stories and learn from each other. So I think it is important to acknowledge there's so many spaces that can be used to bring people together and create that environment for like a safe environment to share experiences. We definitely use different tools to do that. As I said, an online training with different resources, visual, audio, you know, webinars also this pandemic, how, you know, like obviously it had really dramatic and really tough consequences on, especially on minorities. But, you know, one of the maybe advantages is, you know, like creating that online space so people can be, like, it made, I think like it created that like more accessible tool for many people in the global south who usually can't really travel, who usually don't have that, you know, privilege of being able to go to different venues. So even I think Fernand will agree with us, like last week was the forum on minority issues, and yeah, like online participation allow like so many people to register and be there. And yeah, I will leave him to reflect more on that. But yes, recognizing like we have different tools and trying to use and maximizing on them.
Thank you, Rasha. And while I turn to our panelists here, I would like to encourage our technical staff to put into the chat for everybody both the link to MRG website so that you can go there and search for courses, Minority Rights Group International, .org, and also definitely for the Ceasefire Center for Civilian Rights, so that you can visit their website, as well as the Form platform that we just learned. And then at the end, also our website with our course material and training material, which include also interviews with experts, also video-based. So we use film also for expert interviews and lectures. So you can see that and visit those web pages if you like. Well, I turn to our panelists here to ask you then, on an ending note, Claudia, you're working particularly with training for teachers training in this field in the Nordic countries, but also you work internationally. And in these times of pandemic, as Rasha and others have pointed to, how do you see the possibilities for using films as part of online training also for teachers? And what might be the challenges in that respect? And how might they be overcome and dealt with, based on your two introductory perspective on the narrative and counter-narratives approach?
I think something which needs to be added, which struck me when we had this tour on also the choices which are made by the filmmakers, is that there's a potential of being exposed to diversity in a very, very basic sense of being literally struck by experiences which you wouldn't be able to encounter otherwise, wouldn't it be for the medium of the film. And I think what we have seen now, it's in a way layer for layer. There are these films, there is the resource allowing to meet and encounter a diversity of perspectives, and then there is educational material providing perspectives and activities to reflect on these perspectives. And at the third layer, I think what has been said, that now we really have digital learning environments where you also can meet and encounter and interact with people also interacting. So it's this double mediation. And I really agree, and it is also my experience from my work with the Council of Europe, that the pandemic has put many things to a stop. But the availability of digital solutions also to interact with people in very different environments and being exposed for different interpretations and negotiating these interpretations is something which I think has come to last now, which we probably will develop further and will make use of. And I see all this in the resource which you are building now, that all these different layers can be used and in a way can also challenge and regulate maybe the pitfalls which are in the medium of film.
Yes, hopefully. But it's under development, of course, as a part of this project as well. And so Mark Latimer from Ceasefire Center, do you have any reflections on these challenges that arise when you use film as a part of education online, and how they might be dealt with, and what might be important for us to consider when using film in such an environment, either as a part of a course where you have a course leader, but also when people are using the resources themselves, which might often be the case?
Yeah, and I was just reflecting, thinking about all those wonderful films that we just saw tiny excerpts today, and about whom we were listening to. And it really isn't that usual. We saw women and men and young and old, and most of the voices weren't actually religious figures. They weren't clerical. And I think that actually is not usually what you get when you have interfaith dialogue, when you have interreligious dialogue. I mean, I remember a former UN Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Religion or Belief. I was talking to him about interfaith dialogue, and he said, yes, when the men with the big beards get together. And that, I mean, that is a simplification, but it tells you something about the way in which interreligious dialogue is often thought of, about having the men at the top, and they nearly always are men, the religious figures talking to each other. And you have to think about who that leaves out, and whose experiences that leaves out. To make a very obvious point, it generally tends to leave out women from religious minorities or from that religion. And therefore, when you see these films which have this sort of greater diversity, I think it's really important. But the other thing that I thought is that you have to remember what you're up against. And when it comes to online communication, and in particular social media, you're up against algorithms which deliberately front hate speech. They work by picking out more extreme views and throwing them back against the user. That is what we now know about how the artificial intelligence works on most social media channels. So what you're getting is you're not just up against certain types of hate speech, you're up against artificial intelligence which is propagating hate speech. And therefore we have to be very conscious that we're not just producing films which provide an alternative message, which provide a safe space, but we're thinking about the whole of the online environment, the tools that we were talking about, educational resources, but also about how those films and how those alternative messages are disseminated in an environment where we're losing the battle. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And that's a challenge, definitely. And we saw that one of the films was exactly on hate speech. And that's also part of the project here at the center, to work to develop tools against hate speech in education. And that's, of course, internationally a very important effort. Before we move towards the ending and the last film we will see and also hear back from Fernand de Varenne, we will have again a little look at the website to show you, because you raised the issue of seeing the diversity of people in their regular life. And of course we do have a lot of films which include clergy, but we also have a lot of films from the ground. And I would like us to see, if you go to the website of Inclusive Citizenship, and again, you go to the web stories. We have a wonderful little story from Indonesia. If you go to Indonesia, and you see it's based on the film Younger for Peace, and there you can see how it's a film from the contest made by Baza Bali, by the way, and that's a film made by local partners in the Hibualama community in the north of Indonesia.
Halmahera Island is located in the north of Indonesia.
And if you go down, you will see then a little bit of... just continue.
North Halmahera has a rich religious and ethnic...
yes, and you can click on past divisions. You look at the conflicts that's been there, the hate that has been between different groups, and how that has been attempted to be overcome by, if you go further down, the attempt to find inclusive traditions in the community.
During a conflict which...
So, yes. If you go to the bottom of the page, you will see that it's the Hibah Lama community uses. Here, you can stop there. No, don't. Yes, show the music. Younger music, which is
dalam perayaan-perayaan seperti Tahun Baru dengan dibawakan oleh sekelompok orang yang bertamu dari rumah ke rumah masyarakat.
So just this for you to see that it's one of the many efforts to show that there is a communality between the different religious traditions. That is the joy in, for instance, music and shared values. And this Hibah Lama community has found some common traditions that is common to people with different religious backgrounds. So that might be at least one possible approach when you look at these harsh divides, to see what is actually common and to kind of reach that common humanity. And that is something I think art is not to be underestimated in trying to overcome those differences. Now, if you look at the tolerance in the family, I would like us to see, you can just click on the film Tolerance in the Family. We'll see a little bit of that one to see how also tolerance might be practiced, or interfaith understanding might be practiced inside a family, which is kind of unique, with one Buddhist and one Muslim living together, also produced by partners in this film from Indonesia. So let's have a short look.
Ring jagat puniki, akeh manusia sane berkomentar negatif indek perbedaan agama ring keluarga, raneng ranayang hidup nenten rukun. Padahal nenten sami patah, contohnya ring keluarga titiang. Titiang sareng memen titiangi nganut agama sane malenan, nanging iraga tetap akur, harmonis.
So this is a girl
tur saling membantu.
living with her mother, and they have different religions.
Jadi kalau cuma diangkat mana?
Maknya besi aku kena nih.
Susah mana? Memang lama siapa? Jangan bakti.
Toleransi antar agama penting ring jagate puniki. Beda agama ngranayang iraga hidup damai. Dan wenten agama sani ngajahang umatnya kejelekan. Sami agama pasti ngajahang umatnya kebaikan.
Thank you. So this was a short film that was made by people with very little technical equipment, as you could see, by the mobile phones, and as a part of this contest that was made in Indonesia as a part of this project. So we see how this also making films can encourage to people on the ground to reflect on their interfaith challenges and understanding. So really bringing in the perspective from the ground. And then before we see the very last film, I would like to give the floor to Fernand de Varenne, and we'll then hear from you. What are your reflections after listening to these panels on both the challenges but also the opportunities in using film, also in education, including online education, hopefully?
Thank you, Ingvild. Very, very brief reflections and one invitation. First of all, I was struck by how films are forms of modern storytelling. It's really one of the basic forms of sharing knowledge and socializing in human communities, and we start doing that with children at a very young age, and we continue at all stages of life. But films are, in fact, a form of storytelling. It can be very powerful. So as a powerful tool, what can it do? Well, it can create a constructive narrative. We've heard that a number of times. A way to approach human rights that can perhaps, well, overcome stereotypes and barriers which minorities in particular face, And I think it actually helps giving them a voice and visibility, which might otherwise be difficult. I heard that on a number of occasions. But it also does much more because it reaches out, it shares stories also that can reach the majority through digital, but also social media. Because as Mark actually pointed out, we need to have a way of countering the very biased direction of social media, particularly in relation to hate speech, where minorities, by the way, I don't think this is always recognized enough, minorities are the overwhelming targets of hate speech in social media. Usually more than 75% of all hate speech targets minorities in countries where we do have reliable disaggregated data. I was also struck by how films can be about inclusive interfaith dialogue, but also can be a very powerful way to celebrate our diversity. And in that sense, I retain, for example, that art and films can be a form of art, can play a role in combating intolerance and highlighting our common humanity, as been also mentioned on a number of occasions. So I think films can be very powerful to learn through the hearts and mind, as was also said earlier. I'd like to finish with an invitation. And again, I would like to reiterate my suggestion, my invitation for the Inclusive Citizenship Project, I think, to perhaps expand the Web Story Project to mark the anniversary of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Minorities through film storytelling. I think it would be an extremely powerful approach and certainly a modern approach to give voices and visibility to minorities through film, which would otherwise not necessarily be possible. So on that note, once again, I want to express my appreciation for being part of this launch of the film festival and hopefully working with you further on in the future. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Fernand. Thank you so much, both for your encouraging word, your participation early in the morning from Canada, but not least for that challenge, which was, of course, not planned, but I believe we take it on behalf, I think, of, at least we will consider it, I think for the Inclusive Citizenship Project at the HL Center, definitely we are up for this, and we hope for support from our partners, Ceasefire Center for Civilian Rights and Minority Rights Group International, and with the support of Nora to plan how to maybe expand this platform for web stories and production of short films that might also contribute into your great anniversary of the Declaration of the Rights of Minorities in the UN framework on the 30th anniversary starting next year. So thank you for that one. Definitely. And before we end, we will see one last little film, and that is just for us to remind us that we have two different kinds of films, those produced by professional filmmakers, like we have Ayari Ghassan from Tunisia, we have Pankaj Botalia from India, we had Sahavi Sanjavi from Iraqi Kurdistan, and Saad Saloom from Baghdad, who have produced wonderful films. But then we have, as Sivan has reminded us, different levels of also production and different categories of films, like others have pointed out. And we have this one little film from the contest in Iraq, which is made by a group of people on the ground. And it is a film without words. And it has just images, and it shows, I believe, how strong images may be. And it has, I believe, clear message of peace and interfaith understanding coming out of a harsh and horrible context where the Yazidi, the religious minority group in Iraq and Iraqi Kurdistan, not least, were attacked by the ISIS terrorists. And so one of the persons in this film is a Yazidi, I believe the other is a Muslim, and the third is a Christian, but it doesn't matter. They have different religions. And let's see this short little film as we move towards the end. United Hearts. Thank you very much. That was a film, and I don't know if we had Salam with us, organized by the contest in Iraq. And this is the winner, and it's wonderful to be able to announce it today, that this is the winner of the film festival that we have organized with partners in Iraqi Kurdistan. This film, United Heart, a number of films came in, and we have had an international panel with, including Pankaj Butalia and Sahavi Sanjavi and Saad Salam, obviously, but also Saher Mirza and Omer, the Yazidi filmmakers and project managers that we have cooperated with, and of course there were different opinions, but this was the one that got most positive mentions by all in the panel. So the United Heart is the winner of the Iraqi contest. We have also seen in the beginning Unity, the film that was the winner from the Bazabali Wikiton, the first film we saw, and then it was the Six Houses of Worship that was the winner from the ASEAN contest organized by Sriprafa, and thanks again to her. So we had these three contests, and it seems that Fernand suggests that we continue this challenge and widen it out somehow in partnership with him, and I'm sure with other partners that we work with internationally for the 30th anniversary, and also maybe to encourage to include more of the wonderful films and make links to other platforms, make links between our platforms so that people can easily navigate between the wonderful platform that MRG has on teaching about freedom of religion or belief and other issues of minority concerns, and what Stephanos Alliance International has on the Forb Learning platform, the resources that is available on Ceasefire Center of Civilian Rights and others, so that we can easily maneuver between these different platforms and others and finding good links. We've already done that from our platform and will continue to do so. And just for those who feel it's a pity, of course, not to see all the films that we've shown, they will all, by the end of this week, be available on the website, inclusivecitizenship.no, all the film in full length, also those who are not there yet. So you can all go there, visit it, and it's all open to everybody. So maybe at the end we can go back to the showing that platform where you can easily find all these films. Most of them are there now already. If you go to the resource page, and then they're all there. If you click there, you can just scroll down. You see the number of resources like films, expert interviews, documentaries, policy briefs and reports, etc., web stories, all produced as a part of this project. And we even see interviews with Fernand de Varenne as a part of this. So this is a possibility to go and visit all the films. Even Mark Latimer, we have an interview with here, expert interviews. So you can go to the top again. So, and then back to the web stories, and we'll end by saying that this is, of course, as you know, it's been announced as the global launch of this new platform for web stories, web narratives, and with the support of Nourad, we have included now also stories on interfaith understanding based on these films, and we continue to do so. So please visit. Then it's my pleasure to thank all the panelists, including Claudia Lenz from the right side here from our center, Mark Latimer from Ceasefire Center for Civilian Rights, and also thank you for the wonderful cooperation we have with you as a part of this project. And going back to the panel, I would also like to thank Rasha once more for the wonderful cooperation we have with you and other partners at MRG, Minority Rights Group International, as a part of this project. We learned so much from you guys. We feel like as I said to Mark earlier, like a little sister in this, and it's wonderful to have that cooperation, and we are looking forward to one more year with the support of Nourad, and to thank once again Nourad, the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, for their wonderful support to this project as a part of the wider project on freedom of religion or belief and the rights of religious minorities that is coordinated actually by MRG, by Rasha and her colleagues, and where Ceasefire Center and our project on inclusive citizenship here at the HL Center is also a part. And then to thank all the panelists, and I would like to turn then give the word at the final round also back to Sivin, thanking both the film directors, the educational specialists, the civil society experts, and all the others who have been to the panel. Not least Fernand de Varenne, thank you for joining us. You can have your morning coffee now, maybe your breakfast in Canada. Of course, we had planned for you to be here with us now, but due to the pandemic that wasn't possible, although we hoped to the very end, and you're an optimist as always, so we didn't cancel the trip until Saturday. But thank you for joining us. And Sri Prof, our dear colleague and friend at the Maidal University and at the ASEAN Human Rights Education Network, for all your wonderful work using film also in education online. I know that you do, and for our continuous cooperation with you on that. I'm looking forward to it, to continue that with you. And then to thank all the staff here for helping us, and then giving the floor finally back to you, Sivin. Thanking you from my heart for guiding us through these interesting panels and for our cooperation with you, which was actually starting with the cooperation on the Indonesia project as a part of this project. Yes.
Just a couple of words of thanks, Ingvild, and to everyone who has been part of this. I think from the Lutheran World Federation perspective, especially when there was a small grant that enabled our partners in Indonesia to work on these films, I think this experience is similar across the board. I mean, this funding makes a difference. It may be large, may be small, but it is still important because it opens up an opportunity for the contribution of the voices and faces from the South, especially, where often we don't really hear them. And like what I think Mark mentioned earlier, I mean, interfaith dialogue shouldn't just be about men with long beards, but rather it should be about an encounter of different people at different layers. And we have had this somewhat of that taste in this encounter, in this panel, and that has been good. And I also remember that the director for the Indonesian film reminded me that there is also the encounter of the crew, the people who are working on the film as well. So there are all these layers and the encounter of people who are going to discuss them. So this has been such a joy to be part of this. And I've been such joy for me to moderate quite a few panels. And this is one of those that I think we have drawn quite some insights. And we look forward to see more in the days to come in different ways. So from an interfaith understanding and peace building perspective, this has been such a good journey together. I think we need to do more, and we would love to get more support from various actors as well. So thank you, Ingvild, for including us as part of this, and it was wonderful to hear from different experts and all those on the ground as well, producers and directors. So it has been a joy. Thank you very much. Over back to you.
Thank you, Sivin. And then it's my pleasure to actually, or it's a little sad, it's almost, I want to continue, but it's nice seeing all of you, Ayari and Pankaj and all the others. We'll continue our cooperation. I'm looking forward to more films from you. We're already starting projects to continue cooperation with Ayari and Pankaj with new films on diversity in both Tunisia and India and other places. So thank you for that. And Saruni, a special thanks for you joining us, bringing in your perspective also from your context in Indonesia. It was a great pleasure to get to know you as a part of this panel. So thank you to everybody. And it's my pleasure to end 1 minute before time, which is amazing. And a warm thanks again, I think, to Nurad, who is actually still with us. Elizabeth, can you convey our great thanks on behalf of Minority Rights Groups International, Ceasefire Center of Civilian Rights, and the Norwegian Center for Holocaust and Minority Studies, the Inclusive Citizenship Project, that you enable this work to promote interfaith understanding through films and film-based educational platforms. So thank you so much to you, and thank you to everybody. See you again, online, probably. Bye.